Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Zahn Academy. Today, we have a great friend to Zahn and a great friend to the whole dental laboratory community, Jimmy Stegall here, and he's going to be speaking on a simplified digital denture workflow featuring Pac-Dent's bonding glaze in one step. Jimmy, thank you so much for being here. We love it when you're here, and so do our customers. I know that you had prepared some poll questions for us, so all of our attendees out there, I'm going to launch them momentarily. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a couple of minutes just to answer those questions that Jimmy has prepared for us. And we also will have a live Q&A at the very end. So please type your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and Jimmy will be happy to answer any questions that you have. So here we go with our first question. Jimmy wants to know, do you currently have a 3D printer? So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment just to answer. Wow. It's looking like quite a bit of our attendees have a 3D printer. 90%, 90% have a 3D printer, Jimmy. So that's a pretty good number here. And
Makes
10% do
sense. Yeah.
not. So I'm going to end this poll. And the next question Jimmy has prepared is, are you currently printing dentures or routinely printing dentures? I'm sorry. Wow, our attendees are quick. Thank you so much for answering so quickly. And we're getting 100% of everybody answering, so this is fantastic. So Jimmy, it's looking like routinely 41% of our attendees are printing dentures and 59% are not.
All right. They
So
might
I'm going to
change their
turn this
minds
over to
today.
you.
All right.
Everybody enjoy the presentation. Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me hang out here. I'm on a road trip, actually. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. I'm actually doing some digital denture training and lecturing to dentists over the next couple days. And so I'm just sitting out here on the patio at a gorgeous place down by Riverwalk. So what a fun place to do this. So let's talk about denture workflows. And let's talk about me so you can get your CDT credits. That's my website. I'll give you that a little bit later. But what I want to talk about is centered around the Pac-Dent products. Everybody knows my background and where I came from, but I'm an agnostic guy for the most part. But there are a couple of systems that I really like, and Pac-Dent has moved right up near the top of that list pretty quickly. The Rodin, when they came out with the 2.0 denture base, and I started printing some of it, it's just really blew me away. Strength, aesthetics, everything's there. And of course, I think everybody knows about their sculpture and Titan. So those are the two resins that I would use for the teeth in this workflow. Primarily use the Titan simply because I can use it for other things like the all-on-X temps, things like that. And it is a wonderful product as well. So that's what we're going to be centered around. But why are we even talking about this? And, we know our world today, right? We know that, out of the population in the US, there's a lot of old folks like me, right? 40%. Those are our denture patients, but they're also our technicians that are aging out, right? I think the average age for a denture full-born analog technician is, up in the 50s or 60s. And that can be a struggle because we aren't creating new ones anymore. So we look at that X, Y, and Z generation as our future in the lab industry and finding those technicians. The good news is these are the folks that, grew up with internet and grew up with using a mouse. And so it becomes less of a challenge for us to move into that realm. But we certainly have a challenge. Number one, there's a lot of edentulous people. The population bubble is just huge moving into this, right? We already have a lot, and we're going to have even more. It's pretty amazing, when we think about everything goes on in our world with health and exercise and diet, that we still make a lot of dentures, and we do, and we're going to continue to make even more. So if you've got that demand, but low supply on the technicians and even dentists, right? We're not making as many dentists per capita as we used to. And so it's tough, right? Patients might even have a hard time getting an appointment when they want to. But in our world as technicians, this is our biggest challenge. All right. When I think I started at the lab in 79, there were 17,000 labs in the country. And today there are less than six. And so we are really, falling off number of labs. The number of technicians is not down 46%, only around 9 to 12%, depending on the survey you look at. But that could be crisis mode when you're trying to grow or you're trying to just get all these denture cases out the door. So we have to think differently, and it's hard. Change is hard in it's not just lab techs and dentists. Everybody struggles with change, but in our world, in our universe, what we're doing, change is mandatory. If we're going to be able to keep up with this high demand, high growth area, we've got to figure out a different way to do it, right? And digital has really helped with that. And that's kind of where it centers. So there's a summary, right? We've got more patients than ever, right? And they're still growing. The dentists are increasing, but not at the same level. So we might have a challenge there, and it's almost crisis about the number of technicians. And so, what do we do? And we just got to figure out a way. Now, when I started in the lab, it wasn't far from this look. It wasn't quite this, but it was close. And I'm not even sure we even had injectors back then, but you sit around a lab today and you still see a lot of the same things, but maybe a more modern setting, hand pieces and drawers of teeth and wax and Bunsen burners and, big lathes with pumice and all that. And, these are the skills that we learn. These are the tools of the trade. And I still encourage anybody that wants to learn this to go learn this. There's still a few folks that teach this and train this. But again, with the drop in technicians and the incredibly fall in number of tech schools that teach dental technology, I think there were 30 something when I started in 79, and today there are less than 10 accredited dental technology programs. The military's outsourcing most of their work now. So we just don't have the education system to create technicians that know how to pull the right drawer open or which tooth to pick out of that drawer or how to carve that wax. And so these skills are valued. You need to understand how they work to move into digital, but thankfully digital is easier to teach in some of these skills, right? These skills are pretty difficult to teach people and get them productive and effective. If you're going to teach somebody to set teeth the old analog way, it's probably a couple of years before they can stand on their own 2 feet and create enough dentures a day to pay their way. So it's a challenge, right? And we've got to look at alternatives, and that's where digital comes in. But I will never discount this workflow, right? This is how most of us learned it. This is how still some of the best still do it today. And good on you for having these skills. I was never this great technician. I could put teeth on a rim and I could, carve the wax, but I could make it look great. My digital dentures look way better than any of my analog did. This was a very important process. And, that's just the way we did it. And this works for us, but it's not without its problems. Shrinkage, all the varying materials, the time, it's an issue, right? When you have to do something and then put it back on an articulator to correct what you just did, it's a system that's fraught with errors. And unfortunately, the end result, no matter how good we are, the intaglio of the denture doesn't fit the way it should 100% of that surface, right? We'll get it to fit in the ridge area, the palate area, to that 100 micron space we're looking at. But it's just not an ideal situation, which is why the number one product out there sold to consumers is denture adhesive. It's a $2 billion market, by the way, in this country. So, I was a technician, but again, I've said it 1,000 times. I was the lab's most okayest dental technician. And so that meant I became the sales guy, I became the guy who went out and helped dentists. In my 30-something years, I spent a lot of time managing the lab, helping dentists in the operatory, teaching at a couple of dental schools. And managing the lab was always my love because I like numbers, spreadsheet nerd, and like figuring out, okay, how will this work? Will this help us? And so I measured everything. I was a big fan of some of the guys that develop production systems and manufacturing, and tried to move as much of that and learn as much of that as I could. And these were all the things that I would look at. Right, labor cost is always first and foremost in the lab we think about, but you got to think about these other things too. Everybody wants to first have the conversation about, well, how much does the goop cost, right? And okay, somewhere between $15 and $30 or $15 and $80, depending on what you're using. But the big one that we should focus on more would be the labor cost. And so to affect labor costs, we got to talk about technology, workflow, and throughput, right? How fast can we do things? And so what I did, just to know where we stood, right? We weren't a lab that, sorry, we weren't a lab that I said to folks, look, you got to do more. I know you're doing 20, but I need you to do 30. That wasn't what we were about. We were about what can we do, what we're good at, and what are things that we can do to make any of those better, but never did we lose anybody, because of technology. But I monitored, measured everything. Again, we were at peak doing 100 dentures a day, and this was sort of my norm. And it was really the norm across the country, I think still is, that if you have a team of 5, you're probably averaging about 24 arches a day. And it means you're spending about an hour and a half hands-on time divided between these 5 people. Now, the number of total hours to do those 24 are at the bottom, right? But that doesn't mean those people work those hours, right? Modeling guy worked 8 hours, setup guy worked 8 hours. That was our goal. Everybody worked 8 hours, but there was a lot of help and support, right? The model guy would help the invest in process guy the other half of the time, and so on and so forth. And net, we tried everybody to get 8 hours, and we tried to get 24 arches. Did we do 20 sometimes? Yeah. Did we have 15 on bad days? Yeah. But did we do 30 occasionally? Not often, but 24 was our number. And so we looked at that every day, and that's what we shot for. So I knew that if I sold a denture for $364, I knew what my materials cost was. I knew what our overhead was, and I knew what the materials and labor. I could tell you, right? We spent about $155, so that means we were making just over 200 in profit on each denture analog workflow. And that was true with, Lucitone 199 and biform teeth. It was true with Ivocap and Ivoclar teeth across the board, right? And that's about the norm of a standard denture. And that's okay, right? If I could find those 5 people, that's the problem. If you want to do more than 24 a day, then I got to go find 5 more people. And that's the challenge. So that's why we move, into some sort of analysis to figure out what can we change. We can sit and wring our hands all we want about why, right? We can complain about outsourcing or labs that charge less to steal our work, or labs being gobbled up by the big guys. Digital is never for me. It's going to ruin. We could have that argument, but I think I'd rather find a solution. And if all of us agree, and most of us do, that not having enough people is the big problem, then let's figure out how we can work by changing the way we do it. So moving from that brass flask over to that printer is a mindset change. And once you get that around your head that, hey, I can still do a denture over there in the printer just as good as I did it over here, then it's time to have the mindset change and move forward. Then it becomes a process of determining the technology and the materials. And there are plenty to choose from today. Early on, everybody knows where I was in my career. And I told those guys early on that, hey, there's going to be competitors that come out with stuff that's just as good. So, you need to keep up. And sure enough, again, I'm kind of a neutral guy now, but I have my favorites. And we're talking about one of them today. But let's compare what I just talked about, right? Traditional, we would look at that $200 profit. We would look at it on a daily basis, right? So 24 dentures at 364 grossed me $8,700 and change, a cost. And then so our profit was $5,000 a day on those 24 arches. 57.5% gross profit ain't bad. The only thing that's not figured in that would be interest, taxes, depreciation. So that's my EBITDA number, and that's okay. We would live with that. But again, it's hard to scale that up, or impossible to scale that up in today's world. But when you transfer the things that we do to get that denture into a different task, then it changes drastically, right? We move from an hour and a half today to 45 to 55 minutes of time per day. So I can take the same 5 people. Once I get them trained up, I just went to 36 dentures a day. I didn't hire anybody else, right? I just got to teach these people some skills. And the good news is that most every skill in this process is pretty easy to teach, right? Think about it. How hard is it to teach somebody to set teeth? How hard is it to teach somebody how to invest in process? Well, teaching somebody to design is not super easy, but it's easier than analog. But teaching somebody to run a printer, piece of cake. Teaching somebody how to bond teeth and cure teeth, piece of cake. Still need somebody that knows how to understand finishing and polishing and shaping and all that. But overall, we're going to save a lot of money on time alone. Now, as we scale up, right, think about, if you had a investor processor person that was making, $25, $30 an hour. And, obviously I don't want that guy running a printer, because I can go hire a young high school graduate that tech school graduate that doesn't know anything about what we do, and teach him to run that printer pretty effectively in a couple of days. I'm going to put that investor processor over and teaching him how to design. And so as you scale up these tasks that don't require a lot of experience, we move into these other things that are just simple to do, not taking away anything from anybody. I need to know what that waxer knows. I need to know what that investor processors or polishers know, because they know what a retromolar pad is and all that. So if you look at my change in cost and profit, I just went from $200 a day profit per denture to $291, and I'm making 12 more dentures a day. So that gets pretty exciting when you look at the daily sales sheet, right? And the profit. I mean, it's not often in our world do we get that kind of gross profit. So I tell people all the time, I don't ever really think I'll do it again. Don't really want to, but if I opened up a lab, this is what I'd be doing. Digital dentures, primarily because of this, but also because I think the net result on the clinical side is a much better process. Somebody hit me talking about this on a webinar a couple months ago and said, what about the printer? Okay, so I put this in here, right? If I buy an Ultra and a Max today, and I say, I want to get that ROI done in 12 months, that's costing me $98 a day. So I take $98 a day out of that $10,496 to pay for that printer. In 12 months, that's done. And that's all I need. I can do 30-something dentures a day with those two pieces of equipment. Pretty simple. So I like a Sega. I have an Ultra and two Maxes, and I have a little lab. My dentist has a lab in his office that he lets me use. So I put my Ultra and a Max, and he had a Max. And so that's where I do all my testing and playing around. And that's what I have. I still teach for other folks. So I still use carbon, still use hay gears, but this is the mini lab in my dental office that the day I brought the Ultra in place and set it up, this was just a post I made for a Sega to show how simple it was. And again, this printer's great. Takes a lot of resin to fill their trays. But it's quick. It's the fastest, I think, going for loose stone digital print right now. And the Pac-Dent Rodin Denture Base 2.0 prints almost exactly the same. So you can see I have the Pac-Dent back there and a couple of the model resins. And, with the platform on the Max, I can put all my teeth on the Max and put all the bases on the Ultra and print them consecutively. So when people ask me, that's what I advise. I think you need at least two printers. You need something to print bases and teeth. I mean, whether that's two Maxes or Ultra and a Max, or whether it's a carbon and a Max or a hay gear, whatever. You want a validated printer. And so you need something that's open source, but validated with the resins you want to use. And thankfully, most of them are. The key, and this is a question I get a lot after training. For 7 years, I've been training on digital dentures, and I still get this call quite often. We understood it, we like it, we believe in it, but a year later, we're just not doing many. And training is critical. If your people aren't comfortable or confident with the workflows, then they're going to fall back to what they know. And they will always gravitate back to that analog denture, just like a dentist will always gravitate back to that impression tray and goop, opposed to the scanner if you're not comfortable with it. So there's all sorts of training opportunities. Zahn has training opportunities. Argan, Nowat, Asiga, Dentsply, everybody has training opportunities, and you should look into whichever one fits what you need. Of course, I will come to your lab and train. Brandon Smith will come to your lab and train. And so, survey question. Do you have a need for digital denture design or digital denture process training? Answer that poll for them and me. So I'm going to center this around, again, the Pac-Dent. And if I'm printing a denture today, it's going to be in the Denture Base 2.0 and more likely than not the Titan T. I also use the Rodin palette kit for customization. It is a pretty awesome kit because there's enough material in there that will allow me to customize not only the gingiva on those monolithic tri-ends just by using the 4 or 5 different pinks and purples that are in the kit. And this is where you technicians that are really good and artistic, I mean, I'm just slapping on a couple of colors of pink, right? My whole goal in making this one, so it's not a, an A2 denture, so the patient will, not have those questions. But um, it also has some tooth shades in there. So if we want to customize the teeth, we can. I use it quite often to customize Titan. It's a very complete kit, very simple to use. Matter of fact, at Lab Day West, they showed me this manual they just finished, and it's awesome. They have step-by-step instructions on how to use all these palettes of colors to do on any restoration, denture try-in, bridge, temporary, implant. And they did a really good job with this manual. So it has become my go-to reference point. And I'm going to give you a QR code at the end to a handout folder this exists in there as well, but that's the QR code from Pac-Dent. Another product that I want to tell you about is a NovaPrint wash, and here's why. Number one, it's just a great alternative to IPA 99%, which we've always used. And the reason I like it is it's not flammable, it doesn't smell, and it can be used 3 to 6 times, even dirty, and it's still effective. So it's a super effective solvent that eliminates some of the problems we have. It is more expensive than 99% IPA, but I can use it more often. I have to use fresh IPA every time. And then secondarily, when we're cleaning materials like Titan, right? Titan and other ceramic reinforced resins, you can't drop them in a beaker of ultrasonic, right? Because they get this chalky residue. So the instructions are very clear on the Titan IFUs that you need to just wipe it with a damp brush and alcohol, or even take a paper towel and just wipe it off. To me, that drove me crazy. That is manual, that is time consuming, and hard to get it all off. And so I got really frustrated, and I tried so many different things, but I tried the NovaPrint wash, 1 minute in a beaker, in an ultrasonic, took it out, rinsed it off with water, it's water soluble, and dried it, and I saw no chalking, and I got just thrilled. So it is my go-to now. Works on denture base as well. But again, if there are manufacturer's instructions on a validated system, you have to be aware of that. Realize that Jimmy's going outside of protocol when he's doing this, and the validated protocol is done for a reason. I get it, but I see no detriment. It's a solvent, and it works great to not have that white chalky look for me. So let's talk about the workflow. And I'm not going to get in depth about design, but we all know how overall the design works, whether it's 3Shape, InLab, or exocad. We're using tools to set our dentures, but we have all these other tools like scaling and moving blocks of teeth and seeing where the contact is and all that makes our setup faster. We're more efficient. I tell people all the time, I can do this case full over full, including the gingival wax up, in 20 to 30 minutes. I was lucky if I could do a single arch of setting analog teeth and then waxing analog wax in one tools. I love the efficiency of the tools, but you got to learn how to use them, right? And the good news is they're not hard to teach people, right? I think one of the best concepts I've ever seen is taking an old analog technician, sitting them next to a young technician that's comfortable with the mouse, and letting the old folks teach the young folks, right, about retromolar pads and borders and where occlusal teeth need to fit together, that kind of thing. So let's dig into the Pac-Dent workflow. I'm using, again, their Denture Base 2.0, the Titan. Very few tools. I use these little nippers to cut T-bars off, and I use the Wagner Aeroflex wheels to do my finishing. So we'll talk about the steps and how it works. And let's start with T-bars, right? T-bars are a necessary beast on printed dentures. I think they need to be on everybody's denture when you're printing them in the printer. And in most every denture, we need to leave those T-bars on during curing, because the dentures can and will distort during the printing cycle because of the vacuum created within the resin. And they can also distort in the curing cycle if we generate high heat. Now, the Pac-Dent materials cures in the auto flash under nitrogen in a very short amount of time. So the heat never really gets up there. So I cut the T-bars off in the green state. Now think about the time that saves, right? If I have to leave the T-bars on, put the teeth in, cure the denture, take the denture out, then cut the T-bars off. Now I got those little spots on the denture, right, that I got to deal with after curing. All right. I'd rather deal with them now in the green state, very carefully, not generating a lot of heat. And I do that with the Wagner AeroFlex tool. So again, these dentures are printed, fully cleaned, and fully dried. No curing has been done yet. So what I'm going to do is just take the AeroFlex wheel after cutting the T-bars off, and I'm just going to smooth everything down. I'm going to smooth the T-bar support, the printer supports, any printer contour lines I see, but this literally takes me 10 to 20 seconds, maybe 2 minutes if it's a tough case. But I typically use the black AeroFlex wheel on the denture base. The red one's a little softer. You can see here that I think I'm going to change because I realized I still had the other wheel in. But you can see the nippers make a quick job of the T-bars, and then I'm gone to smoothing those T-bar supports down, and I angle my dentures heel to platform. So all my printer supports are around the border, a few passes along the border, and I get rid of those. I could do festooning here, but I don't do a lot of festooning here because I do that in the design phase. Now, that obviously leaves a dusty denture, right? I got all this dust. The key to these Wagner wheels, by the way, on either an uncured or cured denture base or denture teeth, is a very light touch and a very slow speed. I never put it above 10,000. I'm typically around 8 to 9,000 RPMs and a very, very light touch. You don't need a lot. These are heat sensitive materials, so we don't want to generate any heat. But we are generating dust, and so I have to get rid of that dust. And so after this black wheel and after I get those nibs smoothed down, I'm just going to take a toothbrush that I dip in IPA or an overprint wash and just kind of scrub it off. You could drop it in a beaker of distilled water for 5 minutes and get all this dust off, but I'm trying not to get it too wet. You want these dentures to be fully dried when you put them in the curing oven or when you start tacking teeth in. So you can see me using the air syringe to really get it good and dry, but I'll just typically dip a brush and clean all that dust off and out of the pockets off the intaglio. Once I have it cleaned and dried, right, and you can see the difference there, and those are very clean, ready to go. Now it's time to tack the teeth into place. Before I can tack the teeth in, I have to move those supports off the basal. So I always mount my teeth basal to platform at a specific angle, depending on the resin. And I use that red wheel or maybe even a buff wheel to take off those supports. I'm just going to smooth those supports down. And once I have that done, then I'm ready to tack the teeth in place. Now, this is generating dust as well, but again, light touch, low RPMs, doesn't take long, less than a minute, and I've got that segment ready to go. And I'll go over to the denture base and check it to make sure it doesn't wobble. But you can see I'm already done with the posterior, moving on to the anterior segment. Once I've got that done, now I'm ready to bond. All right, so I've already saved some time, guys. Number one, this stuff prints fast. Number two, Nova Print Wash helps it clean fast. I'm cutting the T-bars off now, and I'm smoothing the whole denture up, so I'm not going to have to put any wheel to this denture after the fact. And now it's time to bond the teeth in. Up to this point, with every other system out there, we've been using something pink to bond these teeth in, whether it's the same resin we printed the denture base or some sort of bonding resin. It's always shade matched to the gingiva, which means I've got to be careful not to get it on the teeth. I've got to spend some time cleaning it. Still a whole lot faster than, analog, but, making sure the pink's off the teeth before I tack them down or cure it is been, you've got to know what you're doing. That's where, things go a little south if we don't follow the protocol and do the procedure right. But when Pac-Dent brought out their new glaze, the N2F Glaze, meaning you can use it without nitrogen, but I always use it with nitrogen because an engineer told me one time, everything's better under nitrogen. So when they told me that, hey, this is not only a good glaze for the teeth and base, it's also strong enough to be the bonding resin. I said, what's that mean, right? I'm bonding with the same stuff I'm glazing with. So cleanup now becomes much less of a problem. So my bonding sequence is amazingly quicker, right? It's a few drops in the pockets, seat the segment, So I'll let this talk for itself. So clearly it's a simple thing to take that excess glaze and spread it over the rest of the denture. Then once I have the teeth tacked in, then I just go and put the glaze on the lingual part of the denture because again, I hate pumice benches and I'm not good at it. And this process pretty much says when it comes out of the curing unit, I'm ready to go to the mouth with it. There's nothing else I have to do with it. It's polished, it's glazed, whatever we want to call it, it's done. And the bond strength is incredible. I've been trying to get them out. I can't. And so I'm pretty excited about it. I do use the auto flash. 4,500 cycles. What is that? 5 to 7 minutes at most. And I can get 3 in there sometimes, 4 if they're small or they're lowers, but easily 2 or 3. But if it's done in 5 to 7 minutes, I can do a lot of dentures in this little box. Now, there are other boxes out there that it works in. I'm a big fan of the new Stegall. Don't have one of those yet. Can't wait to try it, but it would hold even more. And it's going to do things a little different. You can still hook nitrogen up to the Stegall, but it also has a built-in vacuum pump. So we could get rid of the oxygen just by vacuum, which is exciting. But the auto flash is there. It's in my lab. I'm going to always use it. It's a pretty awesome little box, but there's some other ones that you can see and how long it takes. Pretty cool. So we've got these dentures and they're done, right? And with stuff that we're familiar with and easy to use. So that's the workflow. And you think about the time savings. I honestly think that now is a hands-on denture of maybe 45 to 50 minutes. And that's good, guys. That's half the time or better than what we used to. Rodin sent me this last year and been fooling around with it for about that amount of time and been very pleased with it. There is a bonding agent. You need to make sure you paint it on, give it a good time to set up, but then you just take the cartridge and inject the soft liner into the denture. And some of the commercially available soft liners that have been out there for a while, CoSoft, for example, they don't stick to these printed dentures very well. Others like Tokiyama, GC sticks to it really good, but this one sticks to it really good. And it's a pretty simple kit to use. So I like it. Repairs, I think everybody knows my feeling on repairs. I'll just print another denture, but if I got to do a repair in a hurry, most of these printed resins, not all of them, but most of them, you can repair them with cold cure acrylic. It's not as good as a repair as using the original material, but so if I have to repair one, I'm typically going to use the original material or the tooth bonding pink resin to repair one of these. But most of the time, I'm just going to print another one if I had to. Again, I don't do it every day. So, those of you that in the real world may feel differently. But this is how we use the soft liner. Going to clean it out really well. Going to create a little bevel for the soft liner to bond to up on the top. Scotch-Brite the inside to give it a surface. Put that primer on and give it a good solid 2 minutes. You definitely want that primer to really dry and set before, or it will peel out. Then we just squirt it in there and put it in the mouth or put it on the model and give it a 5-minute set. So other things that we're doing with this resin, partials, yeah, why not? And we can design them in 3Shape or Exocad. And these would be an acrylic type partial, a flipper. These are not flexible. There are some flexibles that are being tested that are on the market that are great. I love them. But I'm talking about flippers here. And this is a flipper that You know, we do a lot of flippers in the lab world still, but if we're using denture resins, right, and this Rodin Denture Base 2 is twice as strong as heat processed acrylic, guys. Why would I not use it to print these? And you can put wrought wire clasps on these. You can design the flipper on a model where you've already bent the wire. And so the scan of the model with the wire on it's going to pick up your recesses, and then you just kind of repair them in there with cold cure or with bonding resin. Doesn't take much. And you got a flipper with a wrought wire clasp if you need it. But most flippers are pretty simple. We use lingual retention. And if it's a resin that's strong, then why not do that instead of acrylic? So copy dentures, I only put this in here because as we move into the clinical conversation, there's a lot of confusion with terminology, as there always is, because somebody says something and you think, oh, that's a copy denture. Well, no, that's a reference denture. A copy denture is a software tool within 3Shape that says, I want an exact copy of that denture. Now, the tool does allow us to change the gingiva. So we can do a wash, right, and get a copy denture where the outside of the denture is exactly like it was, but the inside of the denture fits the tissue now. And this is for the patient that wants an exact duplicate. So a backup or a new denture that's exactly like their old denture. Shout out to my friends at Rowe for this case. They said this lady just said, yeah, I want them just like this. I don't care that the teeth are worn. I want it just like this. And so that's what they did. Pretty awesome workflow. But when somebody says, I want a copy denture, but I want you to lengthen the centrals and change this molar bite, and that's not a copy denture anymore. That's a reference denture. So it's just terminology. Scanning is different for both workflows, right? In 3Shape specifically, if you're doing a reference denture, it does not want a watertight scan. So we don't scan the tongue side. If it's a copy denture, it wants a watertight scan. So we scan the whole denture. Digital dentures and implants, 100%, right? Again, if this pink stuff we're printing is 2 times stronger than acrylics that we've been using, including the milled, why would we not want to use it for our locators or desk lock or conus, any of these overdentures? This is a great resource. And you see that these don't have strengtheners. You want a safety net, put a strengthener in anything, but my opinion is that at the strength, the fracture resistant strength of this denture base, if we can print it at the thickness that those strength numbers are tested on, right? So that's typically 2.5 millimeters thick on the upper and 3.5 on the lower. If we can get that thickness around the attachment sites, then I'm comfortable with not having a strengthener. If we have to make it thin due to space, then I'm more apt to think about putting a strengthener in there. So if it gets down to 2 or 1.5 or 1, absolutely figuring out a way to get some sort of strengthener. Implant prototypes, 100%, right? If this material is that good, and this is a great use of Titan. If this is in my dentist office, all the Crown and Bridge large cases, temps, are made with Titan. All on X temps made with Titan. It's a great material for that because it has the flexibility, strength we need, but also the durability. And it's digital, right? So we typically print 2 of them. And you can customize them multiple ways. Again, the paint on stains, the palette kit makes it super easy. So all of my tri-ends, all of my implant prototypes are printed out of this material. So that's our workflow, right? And the workflow hasn't changed from material. The big savings is that, we can manage those T-bars more efficiently. We can manage the cleaning more efficiently. We certainly are managing the tooth to base bond way more efficiently. And we've continued on with my theory of why polish when you can glaze. The best thing about putting the glaze on, in my opinion, before we cure the denture, right? Putting it on the denture base and teeth before you cure the denture means that you're painting this glaze on a surface that's printed but not cured, meaning that it still has microporosities, meaning that that glaze is going to soak into that surface 10 or 15 microns. Then when we put it in the auto flash and cure it all together, we've locked in that glaze. It's not just a surface glaze. It is a bonded in, much like our ceramic glazes work as far as the engineering principle. So this glaze is not going to peel and crack. Sure, everything discolors, everything wears in time, but this one, we're going to see a lot longer life with this type of glaze because we're baking it in during the cure cycle. Love that aspect. So the last component is, right, you want to do a lot of them. And so I get the conversation from labs, I just can't get my doctors to order one. Well, you're going about it the wrong direction, right? You walk into a dental office and say, "Hey, I'm printing these brand shiny new digital dentures. They're awesome. You want to buy one?" And they're just like us. Change is hard. Or they may have tried one 6, 7 years ago and they were not great back then. I did that once. They're awful. Okay. So the conversation is not, look at this cool thing. You want to buy one. The conversation is, hey, we've been taking 6 at best, more like 8 appointments to do dentures, sometimes 10. How about we start doing them in 3? How about I guarantee it that we don't take more than 4 appointments to do a denture? They don't care how you make it if that's the conversation. So that's the approach. That's the conversation with your dentist. You market the workflow. You sell the workflow. The fact that it's digital is cool and there are benefits there and you can certainly talk about it, but the end result is it's a better process. So it's going to save them time and it's going to take away all the things they don't like because everything gets better in their world. So the data capture, the try-ins, everything gets better. So it's all about the workflows. It's all about the process. And the reference denture is the most common because that's the most common patient. The most common denture patient in dental chairs today has an old set of dentures. So we're going to use those old dentures to take our preliminary records with. We're going to take our preliminary impression and bite with those old dentures. Again, that's 6 to 8 out of every 10 denture patients. Now, the other 2 to 4 that don't have a denture, we're going to talk about those in a second. So we'll cover everybody, but this is the most common patient. So that's why we talk about this more. We're going to do that wash impression. And this is easy. Most dentists know how to do this really well. And we're going to take that wash impression. We're going to scan it with our intraoral wand outside the mouth. Then we're going to clean the dentures up, give them back to the patient. So we've scanned the wash impression in the upper and the lower. Then we scan the bite. And we send those 3 files to the lab. And the lab makes a try-in. Now that try-in can be tooth colored, it can be pink and white, whatever workflow works for you and the dentist, but that goes to the office for the try-in. And all right, now he's not moving teeth in wax now, no Bunsen burner needed. If the bite's not right, he does what he does every day. Tap, tap, grind, grind. Articulating paper and an e-cutter, right? Grind the bite into where it should be and take a new bite registration. Scan that data, send it back to the lab. The dentist, when I start telling dentists this, they start seeing, and they come up and ask me all the time, wait. You telling me all I have to do is take a wash impression, scan it, put a printed denture in that the patient can wear 3 months if they want to, adjust the bite, mark a midline change, take a new bite. Yeah, that's all. That's it. I can't believe it. I'm trying this tomorrow. Everywhere I do this program, and I've done the digital denture clinical program, I need to count, but it's well over 600. It's incredible, the demand, and everybody gets excited about it. So because they hate doing them the analog way. They hate bite rims. They hate custom trays. This changes everything. So 3rd appointment, we're delivering them, right? If the try-in is the final denture, which some labs do, we could do this in 2 appointments. And a lot of labs are doing that. Pretty cool. Now, let's look at Fred. Fred shows up, no denture, no teeth. What do we got to do? Well, there's some analog things you have to do, right? I got to have a base plate and a bite ram, but I'm going to use the base plate as my impression tray. I'm going to do a wash impression in the upper base plate, lower base plate, use a bite rim to take the bite. And we're going to send that back to the lab. We're going to scan that with the scanner and create the try-in from that. And then we go to the final. We can avoid the alginate to do the base plates by using intraoral scanners. Accurate enough to do this, not accurate enough to do dentures, final dentures, because you never capture all the data. But I don't need all the data to make a base plate. So okay to use the intraoral scanner to get your base plates made. So that's better on the patient. And then we're delivering on the 4th appointment. I can almost guarantee it, guys. It's not hard to do. And then immediates, obviously, if you have a doctor who has an intraoral scanner, he should never take a traditional impression for immediate dentures. Put the scanner in the mouth, scan the upper, scan the lower. When you have teeth, the scanners work great. When it's all edentulous, they don't work so great. So scan the upper, scan the lower, scan the bite, send that to the lab. Use the virtual extraction tool. By using the virtual extraction tool, that means the tooth really had gone. And so you can turn it on and off anytime you want during the setup. So when you're looking at your setup, you can see where the teeth were and easily do your setup. Much better immediate denture setups using digital workflow. So those are the 3 workflows I teach. And dentists get jacked about it, I'm telling you. So You want to do this and you want to get them excited about the workflow, not about the fancy denture material you're using. But you want to use the best. And obviously, these guys know how to do resins. There's no doubt about it. I have tested the Envision veneer. I've used the sculpture a lot, the Titan a lot. The splint material is good. Surgical guide material is good. Haven't done the castable yet, but and I love the glaze. The glaze is kind of my Mike's Red Hot now. I put it on everything. So love it, love it, love it. You can go to their website to learn more. I have some handouts on all their materials and the processes. You know, if you will scan this QR code, you'll get a Google form to fill out, which will take you directly to that Google Drive folder. And I've got all the IFUs for the Pac-Dent materials I've talked about in that folder, plus a list of the materials that I like. You might have seen some of the tools I was using and want to know where I get it. It's in that document as well. And then, of course, my website, if you need to reach out to me, is there. And we can now move into questions, I think, Fran.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jimmy. And just to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded, so you will receive the link to the recording in your email, probably I would say by like tomorrow, by the end of the day. So you can definitely rewatch all of this great information if you'd like. So the first question that I have for you, Jimmy, is from Michael, and he wants to know, when he used the Rodin glaze, it was very oily. Is that normal?
You know, it feels like glycerin to me, and that's why I use a pretty wide brush. If you saw, and I try to spread it out a good even thinness. I'm not stingy with it, but if you get it on too thick, you will fill up your occlusal grooves, you'll fill up your gingival grooves, and the denture won't look as good. So I always go back either with the edge of the brush or with that pointed little green instrument I was using to wipe around the gingiva because of that, and it's because of the viscosity. Yes.
Dan wants to know, he tried the soft reline and someone had said to him that some bonding agents work and others don't. His didn't. So do they sell just the bond?
I don't know. That's a question for Pac-Dent. If anybody's on with Pac-Dent and they can answer that question in the comment,
They
that'd
can
be
put it in the
great.
chat.
The first time I used it, I didn't allow the primer to dry enough, and the soft liner peeled right out with my fingers. And called them, and they said, yeah. So that primer really needs to set up. It's kind of like a tray adhesive. If you don't let it completely dry well, then the brush material doesn't stick to it really well. So that was my dilemma. I didn't put it on. I was pretty thin with it, and I didn't let it dry well. But otherwise, I had no problems with it.
So Darius wants to know, what flexible materials are you using for your flexible partials?
Um, well, I have worked with the carbon. It's great. The end product is great. The workflow is a little unique in that you have to mix the resin before you put it in the denture. And their engineers are smart. They know materials, and they spend a lot of time, and they determined that the best flexible net product is best when you can mix a base and catalyst together and then print it. And they learned that through all the other industries they do stuff for. So they came out with theirs in Chicago this year, and it is great. The end, when you hold that partial in your man, I haven't met a lab guy yet holding that partial and was unhappy with it. So that's one I use. The other one that I've tested, and that I really like a lot, the one from DTAX, Sherman Resin Company, that has had great success over there, and they're just moving into the U.S. this year. And it is a one component. I printed it in my Ultra, prints fast, may not be quite as flexible as a carbon, and not as flexible as maybe, you know, Duraflex or others that we've used in the past, but it is flexible, and it's pretty easy, pretty simple to use. You use the base to bond the teeth in with, but their FDA clearance was supposed to have been finished in May, and the FDA said we need one more biologic test, so it got put back. It's probably going to be July. It's already approved in Canada and in Europe, so we know it's coming. It's just, you know, the FDA. But those are the two. I know that a couple of others, Dent Supply's working on one, Keystone's working on one, but I think between Carbon and DTAX, I'm going to be pretty happy.
Another question here, what minimum thickness can a denture base be?
Okay. A printed denture base, you know, everybody has their own number as far as when they say, okay, it takes 3,000 joules per meter squared of force to break this denture, you know, midline fracture. Okay, but that's at what? 2.5 millimeters thick. What if I can't make it that thick, right? What if I can only make it 1.5 millimeters? Is it 3,000 joules per meter squared? No, it's not. Is it half that? I don't know. I'm not seeing anybody test it at different thicknesses. But here's the one comfort, right? We know that it's twice as strong, at least sometimes 3 times stronger than traditional acrylic we process. So even at 1.5 millimeters, it's going to be stronger than 1.5 millimeters acrylic denture. So everybody knows if I make a denture that's 1 millimeter thick, it's not going to take a lot to break it. Well, the printed one with the Rodin Denture Base 2.0 is going to be twice as strong as that. So that's better. Is it enough? I don't know. So 2.5,
wants to know,
3.5. I'm sorry, I didn't answer the question. 2.5 for uppers, 3.5 for lower.
Okay. So Michael is saying he gets little white marks that get left behind from the Aeroflex wheels. That means they have the speed too high. And how does he remove the marks easier?
Okay, so that happens because we let the wheel get too fast or too hot. I do it too. And it's easy to do, right? So I've learned to really lighten up on my touch, but if I do create that white line, the first thing I do is turn the denture around the other way and take the wheel back at that white mark. And that will take it off for the most part. If I get a stubborn one, if you'll take a toothbrush and dip it in the an overprint wash or the IPA, it'll scrub off pretty quickly.
Darius wants to know, you mentioned adding glaze to bond. How about characterization of teeth and gingiva?
So if I'm going to characterize the teeth with the palette, I'm going to do that before I put the glaze on. So if I say this is going to be one of those bougie, sophisticated dentures, so I'm going to customize the teeth, a gingiva. Well, I'm going to tack the teeth in place, but before I glaze, right? So I'm just going to use a little bit of glaze in the gingiva. Then I'm going to go the teeth. Now, I could say I'm going to hold the tooth segment. I'm going to customize it before I tack it. Either way is going to work, but I typically tack them in. And I don't do a lot of this, guys. I'm not that technician. But if I have to, I'm going to customize it first, and then I'm going to put the glaze everywhere, and then I'm going to kind of tack it with the tack light. Then I'll put it in the curing oven. That's the cool thing about the Rodin glaze, the Rodin stains, is that they can be cured at the same time. There's other systems out there that cure in other curing units that have to have high heat, 80 to 100 degrees Celsius. If you put any of those stains and cure it in that box, it's going to change the color of all those stains.
What about stock teeth versus printed teeth? Can you compare the aesthetics?
I think if you use the right library on a printed tooth, they look as good or better than most carded teeth. My opinion, but I've printed a bunch of dentures with a highly characterized library, and I hold it up to MFT, a portrait, Ivoclar Blue Line, and it's as good or better, right? But it's got to be the right library, which is anatomized to make those resins look good. Now, I've met technicians that say, no, I just think a portrait teeth looks better. And that's kind of a preferential thing, but I don't think so. Now, if I'm making a single upper arch denture and it's opposing a lower, say, implant zirconia all on X, I don't like the look of that because a printed A2 adjacent to a zirconia A2 has different values because of the translucency, because it's a monolithic resin, blah, blah, blah. So in that case, I still don't use carded teeth. I haven't used a carded tooth in 5 years. I will use a milled PMMA, a multi-layer milled PMMA in a printed denture base opposing a zirconia bridge. Looks fantastic because the multi-layer PMMA was built to match the Vita shade guide. Printed tooth, we're matching a part of the shade guide. If you look close on a printed tooth that says it's A2, the best way to do it is to put a piece of tape over the cervical and over the incisal and just look at the middle of the shade tab. You'll see they did a pretty good job of that. But the problem is that's not the way we look at teeth and look at shades. So that is a challenge with printed teeth, is that it don't match the shade guides. Everybody that prints resin teeth should have their own shade guides. So make your own Titan shade guides.
So Arnold has the auto flash with the gas port. Can you use glycerin to fully cure Titan? Because he's heard mixed opinions.
That's a question for either the Auto Flash folks or the Titan folks. I mean, obviously the little clear box could hold the glycerin. That's certainly going to block the air. In theory, it sounds like it worked. I've never done it, and I don't know.
Jim wants to know if the glaze can be used on the Lucitone print materials.
Well, nobody's validated that.
Yeah.
But I told you it was my Mike's Red Hot, but I feel the same way about the Lucitone glaze material. Now, I've asked the folks at Dent Supply, can you bond teeth with that? And they said, we don't know. We've not tested that. So, okay. Well, Pac-Dent tested it. So I'm staying with the guys who know.
How do you prevent the rodent palate from darkening while curing?
Heat. If you put it in a curing unit that gets too hot, it's going to darken. So if it's a denture that's going to be in a curing unit longer than 5 or 6 minutes, if you don't have that ability, then you're going to have to stain it after it's cured. So it's a surface stain at that point, just like all the ones we've been using for years.
Stephen wants to know, when you print your teeth, do you print in one section or multiple sections?
Always print in 3 sections. One section, like the picture you see here, I know people do it. It is, to me, the hardest one to print accurately, the hardest one to get off the printer without distorting accurately, the hardest one to dry fit and make sure it fits everywhere, the hardest one to bond because you got to hold it all down. If I printed in a single arch like this, it takes me 20 minutes to get that segment cleaned up, seated. But with 3 segments, I do it in 5 to 7 to 9 minutes.
And someone wants to know, what's your preferred designer software? What do you prefer to design with?
For dentures, it's 3Shape, hands down. Best tools right now. Exocad can do it, but I found myself just clicking the mouse many more times, and the gingival tools in 3Shape are much better.
And Dan wants to know, how can he be as good as Jimmy, as articulate, as smooth, as talented, as good as a barbecue griller, and such a great person?
That's another old guy like me, right? That's the guy who started back when I started and served in the military. Dan the man. He's Dan the denture man for a reason. He knows what he's doing. If anybody wants to learn about analog, that's the guy to call. But to his credit, he's hung around with me enough he understands the digital workflow is pretty good.
Awesome. Well, we have a couple of poll questions coming up. And the first one is, are you interested in adding a 3D printer to your lab? And if you are, I will be giving you a call and we can discuss what you're looking for. If you're interested in a Sega, absolutely, Zahn can be your definite partner and help you get a printer into your lab so you can get started with these great materials from Pac-Dent for sure. So I'm going to end this one. And the next is, are you interested in adding any of the Pac-Dent products, whether it be the Titan, Sculpture, the Glaze? So again, I'll be giving you a call and we can discuss that. And I will get you all set up with getting these great products into your laboratory as soon as we possibly can. And thank you so much. You guys are so great at answering these polls. We really appreciate it. Next on Zahn Academy, next week, here's another one. We have 0% financing. I don't know if anybody's heard of this, but this is really new. We've been listening to all of you out there, and our upper management have worked really hard with Henry Schein Financial to get this great financing option to you to allow you to get more into your lab with 0% financing for 12 months. And that's really awesome. So if you're interested in this as well, I'll be able to talk to you about this and give you a little more insight on what this is all about. And I'll end this poll right now. And thank you so much for answering them, but I want to let you know what's happening next on Zahn Academy. Next week, Dr. Isaac Towell is going to be speaking to us about the clinical digital workflow and what a lab needs to know about photogrammetry. So this is really a hot topic, and we're so happy to have Dr. Isaac join us with his insights and how he uses photogrammetry in his clinic. Also, we're going to be going to a SIGA in July. We have a live hands-on course us at ASIGA on July 18th. And this will be on surgical guides. We'll be designing in ExoCAD, doing some printing and some post-processing on the Zerlux surgical guide resin. So we really look forward to having you join us there. There is limited seating, and it's at ASIGA's brand new facility in Ann Arbor. You can go right to Eventbrite by going to zondental.com, hitting education, and going to our calendar, and that'll bring you over if you'd like to join us there. But Jimmy, I'm so happy that you joined us today. We really appreciate you coming and spending some time with us and, giving our customers such great insight. Sorry, there's my camera on all of that Pac-Dent has to offer and this great workflow. And thank you so much for answering all these questions. I think this was a record for questions today.
Always a pleasure to hang out with you, Fran. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And I wish all of you a wonderful day. And don't forget, join me next week. Have a
See ya.
good one, everybody.